This is the Head in the Clouds podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping you get your dream off the ground. Now to the man with his head constantly in the clouds, your host, Ryan Romeo.
That's right, English announcer lady. This is the Head in the Clouds podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping you get your dream off the ground. My name is Ryan Romeo, and I am so excited to be back. Last week, that message really was something that I had been waiting to play for a while. Something that the Dwell Worship Conference here in Phoenix was something that was really near and dear to my heart. And but that message talking about the new name that God gives us, that identity that God gives us. If you didn't listen to that last week, please jump back, because really, to me, I know it was a message I gave. I always feel so weird saying it, but it really was an important message, and it was something that I actually listened back to this year a couple times, just to be, reminded of the fact that God gives us a new name, a new identity, something to walk in when we enter into a season of fruitfulness. And I think for those of us that are in this season, we're in this 12 weeks of pursuing a God-given dream. We are in that place where we want to be pursuing the things that God's given us in a healthy way, in a way that's not wrapping all of our identity into it, in a way that allows us to pivot left and right and not feel like we're giving up a key piece of who we are. Identity is so important. And I've been reminded of that a lot this week. There are a lot of us that are in ministry that wrap our whole identity around the job that we have. Even if you're not in ministry, no matter what you're doing, you tend to wrap your identity around the thing that you're doing right now. And COVID reminded a lot of us that thing may go. It may ebb and flow. It may change and shift, but that does not change who we are. It does not change the giftings, talents, visions that God's given you. And we have to be able to stay true to that. So if you didn't check out last week, make sure you jump in. We are on week 6 of 12 weeks of pursuing a God-given dream, and this is our halfway point. And we're starting to dive past the foundational level. Now, foundation is so important. Identity, knowing whether a God-given dream is a God-given dream, knowing whether our heart is right, all of those things we've been diving into the last few weeks, laying a strong foundation for what God is about to do in our lives. And that is the point where we're picking up at this point. So we've laid the foundation. This week we are starting, when I was writing my book, Head in the Clouds. Those of you on YouTube, you're seeing the book. The Head in the Clouds book, I started to break everything into 3 different parts. Part 1 was the foundation. Part 2, I call the dream killers. And that's what we're about to dive into. The dream killers are the things that we have to expect are going to come our way. For people who expect pursuing a God-given dream to be easy and to never come across any hardship, you are going to crash and burn because you've set your expectation in the wrong area. You've set your expectation on something that is not reasonable, and it is not right, and it's not based on reality. Reality tells us that we are going to face some very serious obstacles in our life. And so I want to dive into number 1. So the dream killers are these ideas, these things that we have to expect are going to come our way. So in this section, there are 3 major dream killers that we're going to be going into. 3 major things that we all have to expect. Otherwise, we're going to crash and burn. If we're not ready to deal with them, we are going to crash and burn. So let's dive right in. Dream killer number 1, and this is what we're going to talk about today. It's very pernicious. It is something that is going to happen to you, and it's probably happened many, many times to you. But dream killer number 1 is the critic. The critic. Somebody in your life who says, you can't do that. Like you're not built for that. You're not good at that. That sort of critic in our lives, we are all going to be facing. And I think there's 2 different ways that we could look at a critic, and we're going to see number 1, a critic is something that we need to make sure does not derail us from a God-given dream. I talk about in Nehemiah, and I love this. Nehemiah has this dream. He's got this dream to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and he has been waiting for this moment. He has been preparing for this moment. And one day, the king turns to him and says, "What's wrong, Nehemiah?" And Nehemiah says, "I am so saddened by the state of my homeland, and I want to help rebuild Jerusalem." And the king says, "Well, what do you need?" And Nehemiah lays out all of his stuff. He says, "This is what we need." And the king says, "Fine, you can go start rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem." And Nehemiah strikes out. He gets a group of people, he gets a budget, he gets everything that he needs to start pursuing this thing that he really feels like God's given him, this real passion and drive to dive into this. And as he goes out, all the wind is at his back, everything's working out great. And then comes the critic. His name is Sanballat the Hornite, which I think is just so funny. Sanballat the Hornite, and he comes. He's got a couple of friends with him, which really, to me, it's like you always have that main villain, and he's got like two wingmen that come, no matter where he goes, and that is what we pick up in Nehemiah. And what Sanballat says to him. After all of this stuff has been going really, really well, Sanballat shows up, and in Nehemiah chapter 2, in verse 19, this is in the Message, this is what it says. "When Sanballat the Hornite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and Geshem the Arab heard about it, they laughed at us, mocking. 'Ha! What do you think you are doing? Do you think you can cross the king?' I shot back, 'The God of heaven will make sure we succeed. We're his servants, and we're going to do his work of rebuilding. You can keep your nose out of it. You get no say in this. Jerusalem is none of your business.'" I think that this is so funny because, Sanballat, I just picture him this like dastardly guy, like twisting his mustache. He's waiting in the shadows. He's like, here comes Nehemiah on his high horse. He thinks he could rebuild the walls in Jerusalem. And he jumps out and he says, "Who do you think you are?" Many of us, as we're pursuing dreams, are going to have people that jump out of the woodwork and go, "Who do you think you are? I don't understand this. This makes no sense to me. Why would you, of all people, be driving into this? This does not work. This does not make sense. It doesn't seem like this is reasonable." And you're going to have these people that come out, and you've got to really discern whether a critic is there to make you better or is there to just knock you off your high horse. When Sanballat jumps out, he says, "Who do you think? What do you think you're doing? Do you think you can cross the king?" He's making this a political thing. He's jumping in saying, "Who do you think you are, Nehemiah?" There is nothing constructive about Sanballat's critique of Nehemiah. It's not like Sanballat's showing up and going, "You know what, Nehemiah, I know you want to rebuild this wall, but it looks like you're using the wrong kind of bricks. I think you should, there's nothing constructive about constructive that Sanballat is saying. And we have to discern that. That's, our number one thing. When we're facing a critic, we got to look at it and we go, is there something in this that can benefit me? If the answer is no, you have to, like Jesus said, knock the dust off your feet and you got to move on. You got to be able to go, okay, I'm going to shake that off. That is not for me. I'm going to move on. So if they are not bringing something that's constructive, something that can really benefit you, then you got to know they're just looking to take you off your high horse. And that is never something that is a God-given critic in your life. It's like okay, this is somebody that I need to ignore. Most critics on social media that I face are those kind of critics. They'll say things about me and I'm like, you don't know me. You don't know my motivation. I'm going to set that aside. Now, there are people, and you have to discern, too, the person. If you've got good relationship with them, that makes it a little bit different. People on social media, I don't really have good relationship with them. So when they throw a little pot shot my way, I don't go, oh man, I'm wringing my hands going, how can I make them like me more? No, that's not it. And there are those of you out there that you are hearing critique and you are worrying about trying to make those people happy, when that's not your job. Your job is not to make people happy. Your job is not to try to soothe them and tell them that you really have it all together. That's not your job. You've got to be able to set them aside, put their voice to the side and say, I am not going to listen to this voice right now because I know what God's calling me to. And you have to be able to discern that. If there are people in your life that are critiquing you, that have no relationship with you, don't show any sign that they care and love about you, you really need to hold that sort of critique at arm's length. You really do. Now, what do you do when there's somebody in your life that you really love and respect, but they give you feedback that you don't need to listen to? That is a real situation. And I remember one time when I was first dreaming about Outcry, I was here at this church and I was sitting with the leadership team and a lot of leaders that I really love and respect. And I was sitting there and I said, I've got this dream to take this. Well, actually, I was sitting in the group, and one of them in the group that I love, I still have really great relationship with, she said, Ryan, don't you have a dream that you're working on right now? And you ever have those people that just like call you out, and you're like, okay, here we go. So I found myself sharing about the dream. So I'm sitting in this group and I'm going, you know what? I feel like the Lord is saying, I want to be a part of something where there's unity in the church, where we're bringing together all these big streams in the church like Hillsong and Jesus Culture and Bethel and Passion, and seeing all those streams flow together as one river, as Delirious says, like Martin Smith says, that bringing all these streams together into one river and going, let's talk about unity and the power that there is in unity. Psalm 133, that anointing that happens when people are unified, coming together, that oil of anointing that falls on unity. I have a passion to see that happen, not just here in the valley, but across the nation, across the world. And as I was sharing that vision, somebody in the group that I really love and respect, they started going into like all these reasons why it wasn't going to work. And they said, well, have you thought about this? And have you thought about that? And I was going, yeah, I've thought about that. And then it made a different turn. And he said, I just don't think this is going to happen. It just does not seem like it's something that you could pull together, And there was a little bit of, I could see him looking at me, and rightfully so, going, you're working in communications in a church. Why do you think you could pull together something this big, And I remember walking away from that meeting really defeated, really like, oh, Lord, yeah, who am I to do this? This is crazy, And I felt almost immediately like the Lord said, you don't need to listen to that. I've called you to this, and if it's just me and you, it's just me and you. And there is always that moment, and I talk about it a lot. There's that moment in life where you step out into some territory that you may actually have nobody that believes in you as you step out. And that's okay. Those are those moments where it's like, okay, it's me and the Lord. If the Lord believes in me and I believe in the Lord, I'm going to just start stepping out into it. And that person that gave me that negative feedback, and it wasn't even negative feedback, it was just kind of a negative view of what I could be walking in. I had to be able to set that aside and go, okay, that's not for me. But I still kept that person in my life. And this is a little bit of a side note, but so many of us are so quick to throw away relationships because we have a bad meeting, or throw away a leader in a church because they didn't believe in something that God had for us. And we need to be a lot slower in doing that. We need to be able to look at the leaders in our lives and go, God put this leader in my life for a reason. God's put this church in my life for a reason. God's put this boss in my life for a reason. And until he tells me to shift or move, I am still called to keep relationship with them. And I took Outcry, off the ground. The Lord took the Outcry off the ground. And Shane and I dove into it and went out on the road, had 120,000 people at our first tour. And I came back, sat down with that leader, And I still serve that leader. And I said, hey, whatever it is. And you know what? To this day, he's one of my biggest champions when it comes to Outcry. He's the one that like brags about me the most, in groups of people. And that's because I didn't throw that relationship away. And, there's times in our lives where we're going to be the critic in someone else's life. And we're going to look back and go, oh, that was really dumb, And we need to be really slow at being the critic. We really do, because so many times I talk about this, when I was talking about the ex-dreamers out there. So many times we're going to hear the critique from the ex-dreamers that are like, who are you to keep dreaming this big audacious dream? I gave up my dream a long time ago and I'm bitter about it, and you need to get to where I am quick, A lot of times our critics are ex-dreamers, and we have to be able to look at that and go, okay, it's not for me. It's not for me. Lord, if it's just me and you, I'm diving into it. And many of you are in that place right now. Maybe you believe that God's calling you to something that nobody in your life really believes in. That's not their fault. It's not, you don't throw away that relationship. You just need to walk into it with an understanding of, man, it's just me and the Lord, So that is one big thing. I think critics can derail us really easily if we give the wrong critics a loud voice in our life. Or the wrong critique a loud voice in our life. And we have to be able to go, okay, that is not for me. But there is another side to critics. And I think a lot of people too, if you're a dreamer and you're looking to move ahead, if you're young and you're like, I'm just out of college and I'm looking to be the CEO, and right now they just have me, as the janitor, and I've got these huge dreams and I'm going to take them off the ground. A lot of times, those of us that are big dreamers, we do need critics in our lives. But not the kind of critics that are looking to derail us, not the kind of critics that are just saying, who do you think you are? But there are the critics in our life that are going, have you thought about this? There's the critics in our lives that are saying, you have a lot to learn. And come follow me. Let me show you how to learn this stuff. And those are critics that we need to listen to. When I was in college, I was in art school, and I was in graphic design, and I was also taking a lot of photography classes because I really love photography. And that was my first real entry into the creative realm. I loved doing photography. I loved framing things and lighting, and I felt like I had a pretty good eye for it. And so it was not possible. I wanted to get a photography minor, and the graphic design school was like, no, you get a master's or you get a degree in fine arts, but you can only major in graphic design. You can't minor in photography. But they said, you could take as many photography classes as you want as electives. And so I took them all the way up to like 300 level photography because I really, really loved photography. And I remember I took a couple classes, and I had a lot of teachers go, Ryan, you've got a good eye. You've got a good idea for subject matter and good eye for framing and lighting. And so I was feeling pretty confident. I was feeling pretty good. And I remember I walked into this class, and I had this teacher, and she was known for being pretty tough, and but I don't intimidate easy. And I was walking in that class going, she's a tough teacher, but I'm good at what I do, And so we were still doing, at the time, we were doing film photography, which makes me feel really old to say that. We were doing film photography, and I did a series of photographs for my very first project with her, and did the series, and it was all in the same subject matter, but it was kind of loosely in kind of a subject matter. I was really caring about how it looked. I really wanted really cool looking photographs. And I remember we had all of our prints, and for those of you who don't or have never been into an art class, art classes are kind of easy in some sense. In other ways, they're really hard. And critique time is the hard time. So you print out all your prints, or you do your series of art, but then you put it in front of the class, and then the class critiques it. So I put my photographs up, and I had some people go, oh, I really like, the way that this is. I had somebody like, oh, I don't really like this. And it came to the teacher, and I could see her kind of smiling, off to the side. And she spoke up at the end after all the students had kind of said her thing. And in front of the whole class, she's like, Ryan, I really like the way these photographs look. They look really great. She said, your sense of lighting, your sense of framing, all the stuff that people have told me. She's like, it's really good instincts when it comes to all that stuff. She said, but your photographs are meaningless. And I remember going, and she said, they all look good, but they don't mean anything. She's like, tell me again, what's the idea behind the series? And I kind of was like, okay, well, it's this and this. And I was really kind of reaching, and I knew it, and she knew it. And she said, art is not about making good-looking photographs. Art is about saying something with your photographs. And she said, it is my opinion that you're very good at making visual photographs, but you have not figured out how to make meaningful photographs. And I remember leaving that class going, ooh, ouch. And I did a bunch of series for her in that semester. And she kind of kept saying the same thing, like, Ryan, looks great, but, and I thought, man, I'm digging deep. And I remember maybe kind of toward the end of this semester, there was 1 or 2 series that I did, and she was like, yeah, I could see that. That's really great, and she was still hard on me in a lot of other areas. And I remember at the very end of, the very end of the semester, her final critique of me, it was still, hey, you make good looking photographs, but you don't make meaningful photographs. Took another class with her the next semester, was really working hard, was going, okay, you know what, I am going to make meaningful photographs. And I did all these different series on things that I really cared about, and took some risks, something that I was like, saying some stuff about Jesus that I knew was controversial in the class, because I'm in a secular college, and so finally I get to the end of that second semester with her, and I'm sitting down, and the way she would do the final critique is everybody would line up outside of her office, and we would wait for our turn. And I kid you not, at least 30% of the students would walk out of that classroom in tears after she talked to them. And so I was watching people leave, like crying after the critique, because this teacher did not pull any punches. And I sat with her, and she said, Ryan, in this last year, you've gotten a lot better, and your photographs have become a lot more meaningful. Keep pushing in that direction. Keep making beautiful photographs, but prioritize what you say with those photographs, And I walked out of that. And someone just knocked on my door in the office. That's okay. And I walked out of that critique, and I felt so good, because I knew that I had gotten some kind words from somebody who did not dish out kind words very readily. I got some kind words from somebody who genuinely wanted me to get better. And she did not pull any punches. And when I did bad work, she would tell me I did bad work. When I wasn't working hard, she told me I wasn't working hard. And she pushed me. To this day, I still feel like that about worship music and creative things and conferences and everything. It's like, I don't care if the songs sounded really good and all the tracks were firing right and all the lighting cues were right on. I mean, I do care about that. I want excellence. But what are we saying with it? What's the whole direction of it? Outcry, for anybody who showed up to Outcry, it's like everything I would obsess about, the whole flow. And there was times when we had to have, people come and talk about, like World Vision or whatever. We had sponsorship spots that felt like, we have to have commercial breaks in between. But Outcry was expensive. We needed those. But I would talk with them beforehand going, okay, how could we integrate it into the night a little bit better? And, instead of just hit and play on a commercial, can we talk about the vision for the night? Can we talk about where we're going? Why you're doing it is so important, And I learned so much of that from that teacher. There are critics in our life that want to make us better, and they tell us things like they are, and they hurt. But our job is to go, okay, if they're there to make me better, and they're not pulling any punches, how can I then learn from that? How can I get better? We need that humility as dreamers. We need the humility that says we have not arrived. We're not perfect. We're not going to, get out of college with every tool that we need to get it off the ground. We're not even going to enter middle age with, the minute you stop having that attitude of I don't have anything to learn and nobody around me can teach me anything, we really start stunting our growth. We need critics in our life. We really, really do. We need people to come alongside of us and go, hey, I know you think you're doing awesome, but there's this thing over here that I don't know if you're doing great. I had somebody just recently do this to me, and I was sitting in her office, and she said, hey, when you were sitting in that meeting, you communicated in a way that made you look really good, but this other person looked really bad. And as soon as she said it, I was like, you're right. You're right. My communication skills need to hone in. They need to get better. I need to be aware of my blind spots. I need to be aware of my weak points. Find those people that you trust and lean on what they say. And sometimes when you get a critique from somebody, balance it with, is there some truth in that? Is there something that I need to really be listening to? That is so, so important. So the critic, we have to expect, number one, that there's going to be critics that come along that don't want to make us better. We have to filter those voices out. The critics that are there to just knock us off our high horse and say, who do you think you are? The sand ballot, the Hornites in our life that are just looking to knock us down. There are also those critics that are looking to build you up. Leaders in your life that are there for a reason. And you should trust them. Lean on what they're saying, And you have to discern, ultimately, everything through the Lord. So relationship with Jesus is first and foremost that foundation of understanding what God's called you to, what he hasn't called you to, understanding how you're built, how you're not built. Those are so, so important for you to filter out those voices in your life. So you got to make sure you expect them. I mean, that's the number one thing. You got to expect that the critic is going to come along your way. And that is something that you cannot allow that to be a dream killer in your life. You can't allow the critics in your life to kill your dream. So that is dream killer number one, the critic. And again, it's in the section, in the middle of the book. And dream killer number one is huge. It's real. It can take you down if you're not expecting it. Next week is dream killer number two. And this is a very real thing, especially in our society right now, especially with the election going on right now and all the things that are going on, in the geopolitical world and COVID world and, economical world, all the things that are really loud right now, social media, everything else. Next week, we're going to talk about the noise. The noise is one of those things that can derail you so fast. And it's subtle. And it's one of those things that you could wake up in 5 years and realize it's been killing my dream and I didn't even know it. So that's next week. Make sure and jump in. If you've missed the previous weeks, jump on back, give them a listen. Make sure and jump on Instagram, @RyanRomeo. DM me. I've been doing these things where I'm interviewing fans of the podcast. So if you want to jump on, you want to be on this podcast, get a little bit of insight from me, jump on a FaceTime call with me, I would love to do that. I really have been enjoying that. And jump on Instagram. I'm going to be posting a lot of things on there when it comes to these 12 weeks of following your dream. But for all of you dreamers out there, all you people that are looking to get better at what you're doing and dive into that God-given dream, please, please, please keep your head in the clouds and your feet on the ground. Until next time.